So the footage you just watched was the aftermath of the CTV building collapse that happened in New Zealand, which is what my final project will be on. We're going to talk about who was responsible, what happened, what could have been done to prevent it, and just generally the aftermath. So, for context, we'll start with the fact that the CTV building collapse was caused by the 2011 Christchurch earthquake. It's a 6.3 magnitude earthquake that hit the Canterbury region in the South Island. It was theorized to be an aftershock of the 7.1 magnitude earthquake that happened about 5 months prior. But regardless, it caused widespread damage. It killed about 185 people and was New Zealand's fifth deadliest disaster. Now, of those 185 people, about 60%, or 115 of them, were caused by the CTV building's collapse. So, what exactly happened for this building to collapse? There were a couple different factors, but mainly the support beams that were placed to keep the building up just couldn't handle the stress of the earthquake. When one failed, it increased the load on the others, and eventually the others failed, and the whole building came down. So, who was responsible for this tragedy? Well, there were three people that I want to talk about. So, there is consulting firm head Alan Ray, there is the lead engineer David Harding, and then the supervisor Gerald Shirtcliffe, who went by the name William Fisher. So, first, I want to talk about David Harding, the engineer. He was an engineer who was employed by the ARC, or the Alan Ray Consulting Engineer Corporation, tasked with designing the building. Um, while he was designing the building, he had been using a computer program at the University of Canterbury that he wasn't necessarily familiar with. He didn't know the ins and outs. He didn't know the limitations of the program, which definitely caused some of his calculations to be a little off. He was also not well versed in building buildings that were bigger than 2 stories, and as you can see here, the CTV building had a lot more than 2 stories. So, needless to say, David Harding wasn't very qualified. So, what happened to him? What was his punishment because of this? Well, he was reprimanded by the IPENZ in 2014, which is New Zealand's nonprofit engineering firm, overseer. But that was basically the only penalty that they could stick with him. I'm sure he's getting a lot of job offers because of that. But the penalty that they could give his employer, however, Alan Ray, was $750 plus $1,000 in costs. Those were the maximum penalties that they could impose. I have them up here. This was the disciplinary committee's decision. And in 232, these were the 4 things that they could stick him with: expulsion from the membership of the IPENS, a fine not exceeding $750, him being reprimanded or admonished, and costs not exceeding $1,000. So the building was built in 1986. These were the maximum penalties at the time. Therefore, these are the maximum penalties that he could receive because of that. Now, that's not to say that the disciplinary committee was happy with this decision. They said, quote, "We accept supervision standards in 1986 were lower than they are now. However, Dr. Ray's oversight of Mr. Harding was virtually non-existent. Even if Harding was qualified to design the CTV building, the committee found Ray's oversight was still inadequate." Basically, they said, this guy sucked. Um, Even if the engineer that he hired was good, he still didn't do his job. He just hired him, forgot it, and was praying that the work would be done and done well. So that leads me to the final person that we're going to talk about, who I think arguably is the most interesting. And that person is going to be Gerard Shirtcliffe. There he is, also known as Will Fisher. He was the supervisor of the CTV building's construction, and he had lied about his certifications. He faked his engineering degree. He stole the identity of a man named William Fisher, who is a retired engineer living in England. And basically, he was one of the leading causes of the CTV building's collapse. So, what happened to him? Well, thankfully, his punishment was a lot more harsh. He got fined $500,000 in Australian dollars, and was also ordered to pay an additional $20,000 in professional costs. 500,000 is at the time was equivalent to about 465,000 US dollars. So a nice hefty chunk of change. Now, what was the aftermath? What was the public outcry of the event? A lot of the engineers were not very happy with the disciplinary action. They still want more action to take place. They want people to be disciplined because of it, because this was a tragedy that killed a lot of people. So I think the quote that best summed it up was about here. The decision of whether any disciplinary process should be halted would be better made by a committee of engineers rather than a judge. The judge and Alan Ray and David Harding were all fighting to have mostly Alan Ray, but they were both deflecting blame from one another. Um, but eventually, like, they were trying to get the disciplinary process halted, um, and people did not like that. But anyways, that is the background of my case. Thank you for watching.